The oncologist's words hit me like a freight train. Without immediate treatment, she said, "You have 3 months to live, Mrs. Anderson." That same afternoon, I walked straight to my son's office. Medical papers clutched in my shaking hands. When he looked up from his computer and saw my face, I knew he understood this wasn't a social visit. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights in Dr. Martinez's office had been so bright, it made everything feel unreal. She'd explained how the aggressive cancer had already spread to my lymph nodes. "We need to start treatment immediately," she said, professional but kind. "The specialized therapy costs $85,000. But it's your best shot at beating this thing." I'd sat there in that sterile room, thinking about how I raised my son David alone after his father abandoned us when he was 12. I'd worked double shifts as a hospital administrator just to put him through law school. And now, at 62, I needed him more than I'd ever needed anyone. David's law office took up the top floor of a gleaming downtown building, all glass, chrome, and expensive furniture that screamed success. His secretary looked surprised when I showed up unannounced. When I walked into his corner office, he was reviewing documents, dark hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked immediately, reading the panic in my face. I set the medical reports on his mahogany desk. "I have cancer, David, aggressive lymphoma. Without treatment, I have 3 months." The color drained from his face as he read the papers. "Jesus, Mom, I'm so sorry." He came around the desk and hugged me. For a moment, I felt the relief of being taken care of by my child. "The treatment isn't covered by insurance," I continued, my voice a little steadier now. "It's experimental, but it's my only chance." $85,000, David went back to his chair. The businessman mask slid right back into place. "That's a lot of money, Mom." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "I know it is," I said softly, "but David, I'm asking for my life." He leaned back, fingers steepled, the same gesture I remembered from when he was a boy, trying to talk his way out of trouble. "Let me talk to Jessica about it," he said. "We'll need to see what we can do." Jessica, his wife of 3 years, the one who'd never liked me much, the woman who convinced him to move across town so they wouldn't have to deal with family obligations too often. That should have been my first warning, but hope makes you overlook red flags, doesn't it? I hugged him goodbye, thinking surely my only child wouldn't let me die because of money. After everything I sacrificed for him, surely that counted for something. I was about to learn exactly how much it counted. 3 days later, David called instead of visiting, which, honestly, told me everything I needed to know. His voice sounded different, rehearsed, like he was reading from a script Jessica had written. "Mom, we've been talking about your situation, our situation," I corrected gently. "David, this is about your mother's life." The silence stretched before he cleared his throat. "Right, of course. It's just that $85,000 is our entire emergency fund. Jessica's worried about what would happen if we had our own medical emergency." I stared out the kitchen window at the garden I'd tended for 15 years, wondering if I'd live to see another spring. "David, I'm not asking you to go into debt. I know you have the money." He'd just made partner at his firm, and Jessica was a pharmaceutical sales rep. They weren't struggling financially. "It's not that simple, Mom," he said. "We have responsibilities, obligations. The house payment, Jessica's student loans. We're trying to start a family." Each excuse felt like a small knife to my chest. "I raised you alone after your father left us with nothing," I said quietly. "I worked 2 jobs to put you through law school. I never once asked you to pay me back. That was your choice," he said, and I could hear Jessica's influence in those cold, practiced words. "You chose to have a child. You chose to support me. I didn't ask for any of that." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. That voice, cold, distant, couldn't belong to my son. Not to the boy I'd rocked through nightmares, cheered for at every baseball game, or celebrated with at his law school graduation. "David," I said, my voice shaking, "I'm asking for my life. $85,000 to live." My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay strong. "I'll find another way," he said quickly, like that solved everything. "There are programs, charity care, payment plans. You don't need to burden us with this burden." That's what I'd become to my own child after hanging up. I sat in my empty house and realized something had shifted, something permanent. The son I'd raised, the man I'd been so proud of, didn't exist anymore. Or maybe he never had. Maybe I'd been loving an illusion all along. The next 2 days, I spent researching every possible financial option. I called charities, applied for assistance programs, even looked into medical loans with crushing interest rates. Every door I knocked on led to a dead end or a waiting list months long, time I didn't have. Then Jessica posted something on Facebook and everything became crystal clear. You're cordially invited to celebrate Jessica Anderson's 30th birthday extravaganza. The invitation looked elegant, printed on what appeared to be expensive cardstock, photographed against a backdrop of white roses. Join us for an unforgettable evening at the Four Seasons Ballroom, featuring dinner, dancing, and surprises. I read it 3 times before the numbers at the bottom registered. Black tie required. Cost per couple $300. I scrolled through the comments, watching friends and colleagues RSVP with excitement. Can't wait. Going to be amazing. Jessica deserves the best. My hands trembled as I did the math. If they were charging $300 per couple and I could already see 47 confirmed attendees, I grabbed a calculator just to be sure. Over $14,000 just from ticket sales for a birthday party, but that was only the beginning. I clicked through Jessica's Instagram stories from her party planning process, and each post felt like another slap. The custom floral arrangements, $15,000, the 5-course meal from the city's most exclusive caterer, $30,000, the live band she'd flown in from Nashville, $25,000, the designer dress she'd bought just for the occasion, $8,000. I screenshotted everything, my hands shaking, cancer patient hands trembling with rage. When I added it all up, the total made me physically ill. $230,000, $230,000 for one night, for one woman's birthday party while I was facing death because I couldn't afford $85,000 to live. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. David, my son, who couldn't find $85,000 to save his mother's life, had somehow found $230 to throw his wife a 6-hour party that evening. I called him. My voice was calm. David, I saw Jessica's party invitation. It looks lovely. A pause. Oh, yeah, he said. It's going to be nice. Jessica's been planning it for months. It must be expensive, I said casually. The Four Seasons, the catering, all those details. Well, you know Jessica, he replied, sounding uncomfortable. She likes things to be perfect. How much is it costing, David? I asked. Silence, so long, I thought he'd hung up. Mom, that's not really your business, humor me, I said softly. I'm just curious what perfect costs these days. Another pause. It's a special occasion, he said finally. Jessica only turns 30 once. David, my voice sharpened. How much? He sighed. About $200,000. Give or take. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd already done the math, $200,000 for a birthday party, I said quietly. But you can't find $85,000 to save my life? Those are completely different situations, Mom, he said defensively. The party is an investment in our social network, our business relationships. An investment. My son was calling his wife's birthday party an investment while his mother was dying. I see, I said softly. I'm glad I understand your priorities now. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room and made a decision that would change everything. If David thought I was going to die quietly and conveniently, he was wrong. The next morning, I mortgaged my house, 50 years of marriage, 40 years in the same home, and there I was, signing papers that put it all at risk for a chance to live. The bank officer, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen, looked uneasy as she reviewed my request. Mrs. Anderson, are you sure about this? At your age, a reverse mortgage might be a better option. I need the money now, I told her firmly. All of it. She processed the paperwork with professional precision, though I caught her glancing at me now and then with concern. When I finally walked out of that bank holding a certified check for $92,000, my hands were steady for the first time in weeks. The oncology financial office accepted my payment without question. Dr. Martinez scheduled my first treatment for the following Monday. I'm proud of you for fighting this, Eleanor, she said as she reviewed my chart. This treatment has a 73% success rate. Those are good odds, paid for with everything I owned. But as I drove home, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I'd been diagnosed. Hope. Maybe I would live. Maybe I'd see another Christmas, another spring in my garden, another year of life that David had been willing to let slip away. That weekend, social media was flooded with photos from Jessica's birthday extravaganza. I scrolled through hundreds of images. Jessica in her $8,000 gown, the elaborate ice sculpture centerpieces, the custom cake shaped like their house, complete with edible landscaping. David looked handsome and proud in his tuxedo, his arm wrapped around his radiant wife. In one photo, he was giving a toast, champagne glass raised, a beaming smile on his face. The caption read, "My husband's speech about how nothing is too good for the woman he loves," brought tears to everyone's eyes. Nothing too good for the woman he loved. I screenshotted the photo and the caption, adding it to my growing collection. evidence of what my life was worth to my son. Less than his wife's birthday party, chemotherapy began on Monday. The treatment was brutal: nausea, exhaustion, weakness, but I endured it with grim determination. Each session cost thousands of dollars. Money that had once represented my security, my future, my peace of mind, but I was alive. Each morning I woke up was another day David hadn't counted on. Another day he'd been willing to sacrifice for his wife's social media moments. During my recovery periods between treatments, I started making plans. If I survived this, and the odds said I would, I had some serious decisions to make about my relationship with my son, starting with whether I wanted to have one at all. 6 months later, Dr. Martinez gave me the words I'd been praying to hear: complete remission. The cancer was gone, eradicated by the treatment I'd nearly died to afford. I sat in her office, healthy and cancer-free, thinking about the son who had never once called to ask how I was doing, never visited during chemotherapy, never even acknowledged that his mother had fought for her life alone. You beat the odds, Eleanor, Dr. Martinez said with a warm smile. How do you feel? Grateful, angry, relieved, devastated, but mostly, I felt free. Free from the illusion that family means unconditional love. Free from the obligation to maintain relationships with people who saw me as disposable. I feel like I have a second chance, I told her. And I intended to use it wisely. The first thing I did was sell my house. The mortgage I'd taken for treatment meant I didn't have much equity left. But the sale gave me enough to start over somewhere new. Somewhere David would never think to look for me. I chose Phoenix, Arizona, partly for the warm, dry climate that would help my recovery, and partly because it was 1,500 miles away from the life I was leaving behind. I rented a small apartment in a retirement community. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and it was paid for. The second thing I did was disappear. I changed my phone number, closed my social media accounts, and left no forwarding address. When David's secretary called my old number, she'd hear it had been disconnected. When he drove by my old house, he'd see strangers living there for the first time in my adult life. I was completely invisible to the people who were supposed to love me. It was terrifying and liberating, all at once. I spent my first month in Phoenix sleeping late, reading books I'd never had time for, and walking the desert trails around my new home. Slowly, I began to make friends with other residents in the community. There was Margaret, a retired teacher whose husband had died 2 years earlier. Frank, a former accountant who'd divorced his wife when he discovered she'd been stealing from their business. Sarah, whose children had moved to Europe and rarely called. We were a community of the abandoned, the forgotten, the discarded, and together, we were building something beautiful. During my second month, Frank mentioned he was looking for someone to help with bookkeeping for his small investment consulting business. I can't pay much, he said over coffee in the community room, but it's legitimate work. I'd always been good with numbers, and I needed something to occupy my mind. What started as part-time bookkeeping evolved into investment advice, which led to managing portfolios for other residents. It turns out, when you're no longer worried about impressing anyone or maintaining family relationships, you can take calculated risks, smart risks, with money that was truly mine to invest. By month 6, I was earning more than I ever had in my old life, and David had no idea I was alive, let alone thriving. 1 year after disappearing, I was worth more than I'd ever dreamed possible. The investment portfolio I'd built for myself and my clients had grown by 300%, thanks to some calculated gambles on emerging technology stocks and a prescient bet on renewable energy companies. I'd also started a small financial consulting business, helping other seniors navigate retirement investments and estate planning. Word of mouth had brought clients from across Phoenix, and I was booked solid with people who wanted advice from someone who understood what it meant to start over later in life. My little apartment had been replaced by a comfortable house in an upscale neighborhood, complete with a garden where I could finally grow the vegetables I'd missed. I had a new car, a reliable circle of friends, and a growing bank account that proved I was far from the helpless burden David had once considered me. But the most satisfying change was internal. The woman who had begged her son for her life was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and completely self-reliant. I'd learned to trust my own judgment, value my own worth, and never again give anyone the power to determine whether I lived or died. My cancer remained in remission. My health was excellent, and my future was entirely my own. I'd built a life David couldn't touch, couldn't control, and didn't even know existed. Every morning, I woke grateful for the second chance I'd given myself, the chance he'd been unwilling to provide. Late at night, sometimes I wondered if he ever thought about me. Did he assume I died quietly as he'd apparently hoped? Did he feel guilty for refusing to help me? Did he even remember he had a mother? But those thoughts came less frequently now. I was too busy living the life I'd saved to spend much time thinking about the son, who'd been willing to let me die. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. And some relationships, once you see them clearly, aren't worth saving. I was about to discover that David had learned that lesson too, but from the other side. 6 years after I vanished from his life, he found me through the one thing I couldn't hide: success. My financial consulting firm had been featured in Phoenix Business Weekly, complete with a photo of me standing in front of my downtown office. The article called me the investment whisperer and detailed how I turned struggling retirees into confident investors. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my secretary, Angela, buzzed my office. "Mrs. Anderson, there's a man here who claims to be your son. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. After 6 years of silence, David had tracked me down. "Does he look desperate?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. Angela hesitated before answering. "Yes, ma'am. He looks like he's been through hell." "Perfect," I said calmly. "Send him in." I straightened my shoulders, preparing myself to face the stranger who used to be my son when David walked into my office. I almost didn't recognize him. The confident lawyer in designer suits was gone. In his place stood a hollow-eyed man in wrinkled clothes that hung off his thin frame. His hair was longer, unkempt, and deep lines carved across his face, marks of sleepless nights and too many regrets. "Hello, David." I didn't stand. I didn't offer him a seat. I just waited. He froze in the doorway, staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. "Mom. Jesus, I thought you're supposed to be dead." "We all thought you were dead." I raised an eyebrow. "How dramatic." "As you can see, I'm very much alive." He stepped closer, eyes darting around the office, the expensive furniture, framed awards on the wall, the panoramic view of downtown Phoenix. "This is incredible," he said softly. "You look amazing, healthy, successful, cancer-free for 5.5 years. I replied evenly. "The treatment worked beautifully." "Of course, you wouldn't know that since you never called to check." His face crumpled. For a fleeting second, I saw the 12-year-old boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I was wrong. I was selfish. You were exactly who you are." I cut in. "Nothing more, nothing less. The question is, what do you want now?" David sank into the chair across from me without being invited. His voice cracked. "I need your help." And there it was, the real reason he'd come. Not remorse, not love, not reconciliation. He needed something again. "Help with what, David?" My tone could have frozen water. "Everything's gone, Mom. The house, the car, the practice, everything." He gave a hollow laugh. "Jessica cleaned me out and disappeared with her personal trainer. Turns out she'd been planning it for 2 years. Moved all our money offshore, convinced me to put everything in her name for tax purposes. I was so stupidly in love. I just signed whatever she gave me." I listened, expression neutral, like I was reviewing a dull quarterly report. "Jessica destroyed me," he went on. "She convinced me to mortgage the house again to invest in her friend's tech startup. Said we'd double our money in 6 months. The company never existed. Fake documents, fake websites, fake everything." "How much did you lose?" I asked, though I already knew. "Everything," he said, voice breaking. $2 million, our entire net worth, plus what we borrowed against future earnings." He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Mom, I'm facing bankruptcy. Criminal charges. The state bar is reviewing my license. $2 million. I did a quick mental calculation, remembering the newspaper photos of Jessica's lavish birthday party years ago. They'd had more money than I realized back then. "The personal trainer she ran off with," I said evenly. "How long was that going on?" David's hands clenched into fists. "At least 3 years, maybe more. Brad Morrison, the guy who helped plan her birthday party. They were probably laughing at me the whole time, planning this while I was signing checks for ice sculptures and floral arrangements." The irony was almost poetic. Jessica had used the very money David refused to spend on my cancer treatment to fund her affair. And her escape. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Costa Rica, we think. No extradition treaty. She moved everything into shell companies there." He leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. "Mom, I know I don't deserve to ask, but I'm drowning. The lawyers want $50,000 just to start building a defense. I don't have 50 to my name." 50,000. Less than what my cancer treatment had cost the one he'd refused to pay for. The poetic justice of it all was almost beautiful. "And you thought of me," I murmured. "After 6 years of silence. You finally tracked me down because you needed money." "I made a mistake," David said, tears starting to spill down his cheeks. "The biggest mistake of my life. I should have helped you. I should have found the money somehow." I was scared, confused. Listening to Jessica instead of my own heart, you chose your wife over your mother, I said simply. People make choices, David, and they live with the consequences. He was crying openly now. The polished lawyer Fawade was gone. All that was left was a broken man. I lost everything, Mom, he whispered. My marriage, my career, my reputation, my money, everything, not everything, I corrected quietly. You still have your life. I almost didn't have that luxury. Remember? David looked up sharply, finally realizing what I was saying. The cancer treatment. It worked, he said slowly. You survived. I survived because I saved myself, I told him. I mortgaged my house, paid for my own treatment, and beat cancer without a single cent or ounce of help from my loving son. I could have lost you forever, he whispered. You did lose me, I replied. 6 years ago, when you chose $85,000 over your mother's life. The woman sitting here now, she's someone else entirely. For the next art, David begged. He pleaded, promised to change, swore he'd make things right, that he'd be different this time. I listened with the detached interest of someone watching a moderately entertaining movie, engaged, but not invested. When he finally ran out of words, I reached for my phone. Angela, please bring in the Morrison file. David blinked in confusion. Morrison? Brad Morrison? Yes, I said coolly. Jessica's personal trainer turned business partner. You didn't think I'd let the man who helped destroy my son operate in my city without doing some research, did you? Angela entered with a thick folder. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Let's see what Mr. Morrison has been up to since fleeing to Costa Rica with your wife. David leaned forward, eyes wide, desperate for any news about the man who'd stolen his life. Interesting story. Actually, I continued. Brad and Jessica lasted about 6 months before she cleaned him out, too. Apparently, she's quite democratic when it comes to theft. She took his half of your money and vanished to Venezuela. Brad made it back to the States 2 years ago, flat broke. David's face shifted through a storm of emotions before landing on bitter satisfaction. Good, I hope they both rot. Well, Brad certainly has been struggling, I said. But here's the fascinating part. I pulled out a photograph. He's been working as a personal trainer. Right here in Phoenix at the gym 3 blocks from my office. The color drained from David's face. You knew? You knew he was here and didn't tell me? Why would I tell you anything, David? I asked coolly. We haven't spoken in 6 years. As far as I knew, you thought I was dead. I set the photo aside. But since you're here now, maybe you'd like to know what else I've discovered. From the folder, I drew another document. Thick with legal jargon, Brad's been quite talkative about his time with Jessica, I said. He's agreed to testify about her financial crimes in exchange for immunity, something about forged documents, identity theft, wire fraud across international lines. David grabbed the document with shaking hands. This could clear me. If I can prove she manipulated me, that I was a victim to, it could, I agreed. The federal prosecutor on your case is very interested in Brad's testimony. Apparently, Jessica's done this before several times. You're part of a pattern. For the first time since he walked in, hope flickered in David's eyes. Mom, how did you get this information? How did you even know to look? I smiled, and it wasn't entirely kind, David. I built a multi-million-dollar investment firm from nothing in 6 years. Did you really think I did that without learning how to gather information? Multi-million? He repeated weakly. I gestured around my office. The business is worth $4.2 million. My personal portfolio another $3.80. That's $8 million. David, built from the ashes of the life you and Jessica helped destroy. He just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You're rich, he breathed. Really rich. I'm successful, I corrected. Independent. Beholden to no one. And no one can take what I've built away from me. It's a wonderful feeling. David sat quietly for a long moment, trying to process everything I'd said, the information about Brad, about Jessica's other victims. You're going to help me? I closed the folder and met his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at me with love, now shadowed by regret. Mine had learned to be hard. I'm going to give you a choice, David, I said quietly. The same kind of choice you gave me 6 years ago. His brows furrowed. A choice? Yes, I kept my tone even, calm, deliberate. Here it is. I have enough evidence and connections to clear your name completely. Brad Morrison is willing to testify. I know the federal prosecutor personally, and I have documentation proving Jessica's entire web of fraud. With one phone call, I can make all your legal problems disappear. David's breathing quickened. What do you want in return? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a check already filled out in his name. $50,000, I said. Enough to cover your legal defense and help you get back on your feet. His eyes locked onto it like a drowning man spotting a life preserver. But there's a condition. I continued. His head snapped up. What kind of condition? You have to ask me for it, I said. The same way I asked you for help 6 years ago. You have to get on your knees in this office and beg your mother to save your life. The silence between us thickened. Heavy with 6 years of pain and betrayal, David stared at the check. Then at me, realization dawning slowly. You want me to humiliate myself? I want you to understand, I replied. To feel what you made me feel, the desperation, the helplessness, the knowledge that your future depends entirely on someone else's mercy. His jaw tightened as he battled with his pride. And if I don't, he asked hoarsely, then you can walk out of here the same way you let me walk out of your life. I said coldly. Empty-handed and alone, I held up the Morrison file. This information dies with me. The prosecutor never gets her witness and you face the charges on your own. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. The old David, the proud, arrogant lawyer who'd chosen luxury over love, would have stormed out in a fury. But this wasn't the same man. Slowly, he slid from his chair onto his knees beside my desk. His voice cracked. Please, Mom, he whispered. I'm begging you. Save my life. Tears streamed down his face as he went on, voice breaking. I was wrong 6 years ago. I was selfish and cruel, and I failed you when you needed me most. Please, don't let me destroy myself the way I almost let you die. I looked down at my son, kneeling on the expensive carpet of my corner office, and for a long moment, I just stared. And what I felt wasn't triumph. It was sorrow. This wasn't victory, it was tragedy. Playing the same tune in a different key. Stand up. David, I said quietly. He climbed back into his chair. Wiping his face with the back of his hand, I handed him the check and the Morrison file. Your legal problems will be resolved within a month. Brad's testimony will clear you completely. David's voice came out in a whisper. Why? He looked at me with wet eyes. After everything I did to you, why are you helping me? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of my 68 years settle into my bones. Because when I was fighting cancer alone, I said softly, I learned something about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. But I also learned that I don't want to become the kind of person who abandons family when they're desperate. David gripped the check tightly, new tears spilling down his face. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. No, I agreed. You don't, but that's not why I'm doing it. 6 months later, David's charges were dropped. Brad Morrison's testimony exposed Jessica's entire network of financial crimes. And David was officially classified as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. The state bar reinstated his law license, and he started a small practice specializing in elder law and fraud recovery. He called me every Sunday now, not asking for money, not asking for help, just to talk. The conversations were still awkward, still careful, but they were real in a way our relationship had never been before. We were both different people now, shaped by betrayal, forgiveness, and the hard-won understanding that love isn't unconditional. One Sunday, his voice softened through the phone. I've been working on it for months. The next week, David flew to Phoenix with a cashier's check for $85,000. He handed it to me in my office. His voice heavy. It's not enough, he said. It'll never be enough to make up for what I did. But it's exactly what I should have given you 6 years ago. Plus interest. I looked at the check, then set it aside. David, I don't need your money anymore. I said, I know, he replied, but I need to give it to you. Not because you need it, but because I need to prove to myself that I'm not the man who let his mother face cancer alone. We talked for hours that day. Truly talked, the first real conversation since he was a child. He told me about the depression that consumed him after Jessica left, the therapy he'd started, and the slow process of rebuilding his self-worth. I shared my story too, about my business, my friends in Phoenix, the life I'd built from nothing. I'm proud of you, he said as he prepared to leave. I know I don't have the right to be, but I'm proud of the woman you've become, he continued, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming. I replied, not the man you were, but the man you're choosing to be now. As I watched his taxi disappear into the Phoenix traffic, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. 6 years ago, I'd faced death alone because my son chose money over my life. Now he'd lost everything and discovered what truly mattered, not wealth, status, or social connections, but the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. I had saved myself, built a fortune, and proven I didn't need anyone's rescue. But the most valuable thing I gained wasn't money, success, or independence. It was knowing that I could forgive without forgetting, help without enabling, and love without surrendering my self-worth. Some lessons cost everything to learn. David had learned his, and in teaching it to him, I'd learned something too. Sometimes the most powerful victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's showing them a better way to be human. Life had taught him a hard lesson. I'd taught him an even harder one. But in the end, we both learned the hardest lesson of all. Family isn't about blood or obligation, it's about choosing to stand by each other even when it costs everything you have. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.